Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Evil. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off with the Christian side of things. Obviously, with the revelation she found out last episode with the whole David and LeConte situation, she is having nightmares again, and it's George, but George isn't alone this time. He brought a little guest, Alexis, and he put a video on a video tap, and it's him flossing, and then him and Alexis are flossing together. I'm like, I love how weird and stupid this show is. That's so wild. That's so interesting. And like, the fact is the actress who plays Alexis has to like do floss next to a demon like it's nothing. She's kind of got like this smile on her face, but I'm like, I wonder how many takes did that take, because it's ridiculous what you're having to do. It's kind of crazy. It's one of those things where you're like, yeah, it's scary and weird in some points, but you're also like, what is the show like behind the scenes? Like, is stuff is like scary, like when you're filming, because they kind of talk about horror stuff isn't really that scary when you're filming it. It's obviously like a lot of it's in like the editing and stuff like that, and how, you know, the music cues and the sound cues and just like how it's executed, and you kind of cut out all probably like the silly stuff behind the scenes that kind of give it that serious tone. But maybe like horror sets are a lot more like fun than you would kind of give them credit for. I'm always interested by that, because I think people have talked about it. Well, I want to say Raul Coley's talked about, like, obviously with some of the stuff he's worked on with was it Blind Manor? I still need to go see that and Haunting, both the Haunting Houses series. I need to go see them. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed Midnight Mass, but it's one of those things that, like, yeah, it's not as creepy until you get to like actually seeing it. You're like, oh wow, this is the show we were filming. That whole thing. So either way, tangents and all that aside, but she's kind of trying to deal with and comprehend all this, because now she knows, like, right, Leland's been every step of Leland being in my life has all been towards him working towards getting close to my daughter. And now she wonders if the same thing's for David. And he's like, what? She's like, how do I know it wasn't you coming into my life asking me to be a part of your work wasn't by design? It's like, he's like, no, it wasn't. But I'm like, well, and she didn't throw this argument in his face, but I'm like, isn't everything supposed to be about God's design? So you coming into her life and her kind of getting mixed up on this kind of was God's plan and God's design. But then you kind of start thinking about, well, you take a show like Lucifer and you're like, well, God doesn't have everything as planned out as you think he does. Like, he has his reasons for doing certain things, but he also wants to get you know, you kind of get into that territory. I'm surprised David, a man of faith, wouldn't just say, like, well, it is by God's design, but I think he wants to also, but he might be someone that's like, yeah, it's by God's design, but at the end of the day, God leaves us open to make our own choices. So maybe that's why he didn't really that argument didn't really come up. But yeah, and it makes her kind of question everything. It's like, right, David is someone she felt like she could confide into. Like, she thought he was better than other people in that regard. But now it's like, the fact is he lied to her, like, over and over again, repeatedly. Now it proves to her, like, right, you are just like everyone else. She kind of put him on a pedestal, and he's like, you're right. Because David is human. He had a life before being a priest, but he's always been honest with her. Yeah, they might have had their disagreements here and there, but he's someone that she always felt she could rely on. She even says later on, like, I love you. And she's like, I don't even want that to get misinterpreted it in a certain way of, like, me saying it in a way that I don't mean it, but it's like, I do love you. I love you as a friend. I love you as a person I respect, you know? So we'll see kind of where the relationship is, because, like, obviously the relationship was kind of rocky here. Obviously started off a little rocky and awkward just because of, well, things, they had their issues last season too, with obviously the whole, like, her kind of killing somebody and getting away with it and everything. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it does beg the question. It's like, yeah, for her, both you and Leland came into her life at the same exact time. So it's just, yeah. But, you know, maybe that's also like the battle for your soul and your family's soul, that it's like, right, the devil's army came to get you and came into your life just at the same time as God's army came into your life. It's like, maybe you can look at it like that. But throughout the entire episode, it kind of made her start looking into the whole other baby of hers, the other egg of hers that was lost, which I completely forgot about that story beat. I was like, oh right, I forgot you were looking into that because you came to confront RSM about that, but they were like, yeah, we have no record of it. But like her lawyer is like putting him in a corner. Is like, right, this is like a $43 million lawsuit that could end up happening, and they ended up giving up the information. At first it's like, right, they might have given it to a research facility, which that medical research facility may have implanted it with someone, which we find out they did. And Kristen later on meets the mom. It's Valerie and her husband Logan. And obviously, like, the lawyer's trying to get in the middle of it, but Valerie's just like, shut up. This is a conversation between moms. It's like, because, like, obviously Kristen's not here to try and take their baby away, because for her, it's like, this baby's our miracle baby. Like, I struggled to get pregnant. And Kristen's not trying to take that away, but it's like, right, genetically speaking, yeah, it's 50% Logan, but it is also 50% Kristen. And Valerie's just like, right, I want you to be in this baby's life. And she's like, I would like that. But then Logan comes with concerns like, should I know something about the baby? I'm like, how do you know you should be asking about that? And it's like, but apparently, like, rumors have come around about RSM, which I get it. He's a new parent, and with everything going on, you don't want to like jinx him, but you know there's something sinister with RSM just because you know how things have gone down with other families related to that, and you also know that Leland is trying to pursue your own daughter. But it's like, right, this is a newborn. You don't want to scare them. You don't want to worry them, because what's interesting is she ends up talking to Ben about that later on, about the conversation of genetics, you know, nature versus nurture. And it's like, no, Lexus is good. You're a great mother. But it's just for her. It's like, right, could they genetically remove empathy? And it's like, yeah, theoretically speaking, but we're not there yet. But, you know, she's worried, I think, about, you know, obviously Logan's concerns about, like, oh, he didn't hear the baby's heartbeat. He heard a growl. It's like, that started to freak him out. But, like, Kristen was able to kind of appease some of his worries. And especially with Ben being like, right, it's nature versus nurture. Kind of, that's all it has to come down to. And he's like, I guarantee you, nurture will win out time and time again. But then you have that complicated thing of people being like, yeah, but what's your explanation for, like, evil in the world? Because not trying to go to, like, the most extreme example, but yeah, let's talk in not hyperboles, but, like, you know, extremes. Like, what about Hitler? Like, I don't know. I've never actually looked into Hitler's, like, upbringing. Like, cause wasn't the whole thing, like, also, like, his parents were decent people? I mean, I don't know. Once again, I'm not a historian. Like, I'd actually love to hear that from someone and be like, oh, cause wasn't, like, before he became the evil piece of shit that he was, wasn't he just, like, a painter or something like that? But it's like, yeah. That kind of gets in that territory of, like, right, like, I mean, I like to believe everyone's a blank slate, and I do kind of lean more towards your nurture and environment play a big role in what shape you into who you are. But, you know, I think an argument could be made in some cases of, like, no, some people are just fucking born evil. Like, there's just some evil that's rooted in the world. Like, it's just, like, some shit. It's like, how is that, like, the evil shit that people do on a daily basis, you're like, is that just so ingrained in human DNA that we just have the capacity? I mean, we all have the capacity to do bad, to be evil. That it's just like, you know, the good is choosing to do good, to be good, you know? But it almost makes it sound like, man, we are just naturally prone to be evil. We're just like, our conscience and our decent nature, you know, keep us from being complete and other garbage pieces of shit to some extent. But it's just like, I don't know. That's an interesting, like complexity to it. Like, I don't think it's as black and white. I get why Ben's just trying, like, I think he probably just believed, you know, he even said, like, as a scientist and a friend I'm speaking to, because he wanted to ease any doubts that Kristen might have. But I'm like, it does open up the door for, like, larger questions of, like, there is complexities in that. There are examples of, once again, I use an extreme example because that's an example I don't know. Like, I don't know what Hitler's, like, upbringing was, whether he had decent enough parents. It doesn't matter, because he ended up being one of the biggest garbage human beings in existence. But still, it begs the question, like, you know, were his parents decent and he still ended up being a piece of shit, or were his parents shitty and he turned out shitty? That's an interesting and complex question, and it's a very, like, human nature conversation, you know? So she talks to Logan again, and Logan's just like, no, I don't need to talk to anyone. And I guess that should have been kind of maybe a sign or something, because Kristen goes and sees him later, and he literally killed his wife, because it's like, oh, the baby was killing her, and I was trying to save her. You know, that thing was, you know, evil, and it was going to kill her. And it seems like it looks like we didn't get to look at the scene. Like, once again, if this was probably any other show, they probably would have shown that. I mean, God, like, if you've seen, Under the Banner of Heaven kind of got into that territory. Like fucking The Outsider on HBO super got into that territory where you're just kind of like, it's like some shit you're, and Perry Mason, you're just kind of like, you don't need to go that hard in the paint, but it's meant to like hit you, gut punch you, and I'm just like, maybe Paramount just kind of like pulled back, or maybe just the creators in the gym were like, we don't need to go super hard in the paint, but I can only assume like he ripped her stomach open and literally clawed the baby out of her, like, but in his mind he thinks he was doing the right thing. It's like that thing was evil and it was killing her regardless, and I saved her from her pain and suffering. I'm like, and so whatever that investigation ends up being, whether that's going to be something we see this season or whether that's something that's going to be in season 4, like that story is not done. We're definitely going to get a continuation to that. Like, you know, it's like, right, was he insane? And obviously Kristen, who was associated with the family, twofold to it. One, the fact that something terrible like that happened to, because also, let's not forget, that also hurts her too, because like, right, she was getting close to Valerie, but also that baby was kind of hers. And now it's like, right, if you're saying that about that baby, now whether she really realizes or not, maybe on some level she's going to start thinking about Lexus. I don't know. Obviously, a lot of this episode kind of got her thinking about all of that. So it does beg the question, like, what that's going to turn into. Because interestingly enough, the thing they were looking into was like some toys that seemed super demonic. The fact is that Ben was doing that 8-ball thing and it's like, help, I'm in hell. And then like the toys were creepy. The Jack in the Box, I was like, the fact is it's spring. I'm like, okay, it's going to wait to spring out the jump scare Ben. I thought it was going to, like, every time it was up close, I was like, I'm waiting for it. I'm like, I was legitimate curious. I'm like, am I going to jump from this thing? I didn't, but I was surprised that they didn't, like, when the camera was pointing down, I'm surprised that's not when they did it. They waited till like Ben moved it over and then it cranked itself a few times on its own and then did it. And then the clown just kept, Clown kept like laughing maniacally over in the corner. It's like, that's creepy as shit. The 8-ball, there's a finger in it. At first you're like, wait, is that a finger? Then he pops it open, it's full of blood, and yep, there's a finger. And it's like, okay. He just assumes like it's a manufacturing accident, because he was thinking at first this was all like some prank or something. But then later on, David kind of confers that this is all about these toys were made in China, and that people who were being held there were trying to basically get messages out. So that's what this is all relative to. Like, that's what this was really all about. I mean, we got some of the toys manifesting that, but like, what about all the other toys being creepy too? Maybe, well, to be fair, there were like hidden messages and stuff in there too. So maybe there were hidden messages in the other toys too, and maybe they were meant to be a little unsettling just to bring that out, like for people to notice or something, and hopefully tear into the toys and get the mess. I don't know if that's supposed to be in date, because like the way Ben kind of put it, like the toys look the way they did is just because they're supposed to be knockoffs anyway. So either way, it's interesting too how this also connects us to like LeConte showing up, and and he's like, oh, like he wants to talk to David, but it's in the confessional. I'm like, doesn't that seem a little blasphemous? But the way he talks about it is like, you and me, we do the dirty work so that other people don't have to, and so no one else has to get their hands dirty. This is all for the sake of the Lord. So he's like, yeah, so you're going to take an assignment, and when someone says the words honky tonk, you're going to tell me the 12th word after that. And David's almost like, what the fuck? Are you serious? He's like, I am deadly serious. Someone's going to say honky tonk. Give me the 12th word afterwards. And you're like, he's like, this is a game to you, isn't it? He's like, yes, a very serious game that obviously they plan to win. But I'm like, honky tonk? And then it came up and it was like, okay, oh, the word is matters. And then later on, David was like, no, actually it's a different word. It's ignore. And LeConte wasn't listening to him. But then it turns out like, yeah, this is in fact all about Grace and saving her. So David got brought to like the table when like I don't know if that entire group there was, I'm assuming that's supposed to be the entity as its whole, but like they're talking on a large scale. They're doing some exchanges like, okay, we will give you this and that for the person that you're holding captive. And it turns out like, no, the message they were given is talk to Lao, not Ji. So it's like, right, Ji, you're not the one I'm supposed to be talking to. Supposed to talk to me Lao. And Lao kind of, and then later on as we see, Grace and him run into each other at the end of the episode. So it all worked out in the end. So I think that is neat, and I think that's good. It is a nice, well, not nice. Nice is the wrong word. It's an interesting juxtaposition, because I've been using that word a lot, because I actually really do like that word. Actually, like, I've always thought I knew what the word was, and I did look it up, and I'm like, okay, so it's kind of what I thought it was. So, I mean, context clues actually kind of, like, makes it kind of clear to some extent, too, but regardless. But I do like that, like, how David, like, hugging Grace at the end, and then, like, Kristen seeing the horrifying scene that she did, especially after they had their conversation, where he's like, you are the person I care about most, but my devotion, like everything, like when God asks me to do something, I must obey, because he's like, you might not believe in God, but I do. And so he's going to follow this through and through. Once again, you're still completely unaware. The fact is you're getting infected by a demon. Andrea shoot it off, but God forbid it probably still comes back to haunt you. Anytime we see demon Kristen in your dreams, like, we know, like, it's something messing with you from the outside, and whether or not that gets dealt with this season, we'll see. I'm assuming. Once again, I believe this season's only 10 episodes, so we only got 2 episodes left, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I say, like, oh, we'll probably deal with that Logan, Valerie, Kristen thing next season, but I'm like, I'd assume that's going to be a this season thing. Because another element, obviously tied together in all of this, is the whole situation with Cheryl is bringing Lexus, and even Lexus is like, why are you taking me? It's like, well, you're special. It's like, yeah, I'm just taking one granddaughter at a time. And I'm like, that's kind of effed up. You're once again, I guess you're on the evil train because you're serving your granddaughter up on a silver platter. And she's like, okay. The moment they went there, I was like, okay, what's going to happen is he's going to look like I thought he was going to look like a normal human to both Cheryl and Alexis, and I thought that was going to I think Cheryl was going to be like, wait, what? Like, I thought that's what's going to happen, but he presented himself as his demon self. But and Alexis was acting fine, I'm like, she doesn't see him as a demon, does she? And Cheryl asked her, and she's like, what? He had, 2 eyes. And Cheryl just kind of laughs and is like, wow, so maybe you're not the demonic person I believe you to be, or at least Leland does. But Leland's like, no, she has to be the one. If not, she's the ambassador, which I was immediately like, at first I was like, could that be what Kristen's other child was going to be? Like that, the one that Valerie's going to have, like, was that the actual one? And Lexus was just the ambassador? Because maybe eventually, Kristen would have invited the other girls to meet their pseudo half-sister. I wonder if that was going to be some correlation there. I mean, I'm assuming the baby's sadly deceased, but not unless we find out Valerie's dead, but the baby ended up surviving the whole ordeal. Maybe there's a possibility of that. But maybe Lexus isn't just meant to be a head honcho. Maybe she is just meant to be an ambassador role, kind of, I guess, serving the person who eventually does take up that mantle that they're hoping she takes up. I don't know. The fact is that Lexus didn't, I guess, because once again, his belief is like, right, she just needs more negative influence in her life. Because her mom, it is nature versus nurture, and the nurture is winning out of the nature that they're hoping would take root. And it's like, it's there. It's taking root to some extent, but the nurture of her mom's love, once again, the moment Kristen finds out that Cheryl is mixed up in all of this, obviously Cheryl's not, well, because she never actually got to meet. She doesn't know Leland's connected to all of this, because that would have been an issue. And Cheryl knows not to kind of put Lexus and Leland around each other, but just showing off her boss. And so maybe at one point, Kristen's going to like decide to check up on her mom's job without letting her know. And Leland's going to be there. And it's like, oh, she's talking to my mom? I mean, he's talking to my mom? Wait. It's like all these, everything's in by design, and he got close to, because she's still unaware about the Andy thing. When will she find out about that? God, that might not even be a thing until next season when she finds out about Andy either. Like, poor bastard. I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. At the same time, there's the whole thing with Kurt trying to get his mojo back. And now, instead of like a little girl chasing after like a bird and hatcheting it, it's a demon with a hatchet chasing after Kurt. He's like, oh, you're trying to catch up to me, huh? And so he didn't cut off Andrea's hair. He just took hair from her drainage. And it's like, cool. Now, instead of going at things from your perspective, how about you just try it out for yourself? So it's all about being possessed. And he tries out an actual possession. I don't know if that was kind of like a placebo effect, considering, like, which is interesting that you as a doctor wouldn't immediately take that as a placebo, but but he's doing work. And then like he's speeding it up at the end, and the demon's still chasing him. But I guess he's like, yeah, like he's kind of getting a thrill out of it. Like, come on. Like, I guess he's talking to himself. Like, yeah, I can get all this work done. I can take all this influence and all this, but the demon won't catch up to me. Like, come on. I know I can get away from. It's like you make a deal with the devil, like you will end up paying. It's interesting because something else recently had a deal about the devil, and the devil still got what he was owed. There's always loopholes in the contract, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Kurt, too, as just like everyone around her and her, because once again, like everyone in her family has now been touched by all of this to some direct correlation in Alexa's case, other cases kind of directly yet indirectly. So now it's like her mom, her husband, her children, herself, and now her therapist, and obviously her, Ben, and David all battle the evil and kind of are in the mix of all of that on a daily basis. So I don't think there's anyone that it hasn't quite touched yet in her personal life, but we'll definitely have to wait and see where everything takes us. Like I said, only 2 episodes left this season, so whatever goes down next episode, what that might tee up for the season finale, is definitely going to be interesting. I do know that they had I think they had a panel at Comic-Con, which I wasn't aware of. I'm curious what went down on it. I'm sure, like, logistically, like, not saying you should, but, because I don't know if there's anywhere official that put up, like, the panels, but I know, like, there's unofficial, like, panel stuff, but I think there's some, like, official stuff, too, so, like, I'm sure you can find that on YouTube, but I skimmed across that somewhere that there was an evil panel at this most recent San Diego Comic-Con I was completely unaware about. Either way, tangents and all that aside, I am, like I said, excited to see what happens next. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.